Hi everyone, welcome back. I did pray about what topic I'm going to discuss with you all today, and I feel as if Yeshua is leading me to talk about some history first with all of you, because unless we start at the very beginning and talk about how things were, we are not going to know how we are supposed to be to this day. Now, many of you might think that, well, you just might be thinking about how there are a lot of churches out there, and there are also a lot of Messianic synagogues out there. And you're probably thinking to yourself, which one is correct? Which one should we do? Which one should we attend? Is it right that I'm sitting in a church? Is it right that I'm sitting in a synagogue, in a Messianic synagogue? Is it wrong that I'm sitting in a church? Is it wrong that I'm sitting in a Messianic synagogue? So, I know a lot of you think in that way. And a lot of you also think about how there are so many doctrines out there. Doctrines are actually man-made, but there are so many denominations in the world. Don't have to list them all or name them all. We know that there are many congregations, many denominations. And then you have your Catholics, and you have your Protestants, and you have your Messianic Jews. And that mostly puts everyone under an umbrella, because there isn't much more than that other than other religions, right? So we're going to talk about how 2,000 years ago, if we go back 2,000 years ago to the time where Yeshua and his disciples were walking the earth, there were no churches. There were no denominations. There was nothing like that. There were no Catholics. There were no Protestants. There were no Messianic Jews. Okay, there were just believers in Messiah Yeshua, in Mashiach Yeshua. And they called themselves the Way. And they all went to synagogue. And they all kept the feasts and festivals. And they all kept Torah. And they all kept the Sabbath. Now, they did meet on Sunday, the first day of the week. Yes, sure. But there are also accounts in the scriptures where many of the disciples kept the Saturday Sabbath. And you guys, they were doing this. They were doing all of this after the death of Yeshua. They did it during Yeshua's ministry, and they did it after Yeshua's ministry. Okay, after he died and was resurrected, they were still doing it. They were still keeping the Torah. They were still keeping the feasts and festivals. They were still keeping the Sabbath. So we need to think about, if they are our example, then we should also be keeping the way, the narrow path. We should be following their example. But that did not happen. Okay, and honestly, I'm not a good historian. Trying to anyway, I'm not a good historian. Okay, I don't know a lot about church history, church fathers, and that sort of thing. I know about it. Okay, I know enough to know that a lot of men changed a lot of things that the first believers were doing. Why? That's the question. Ask yourself why. Why did all of these churches, different churches, start up? Why did all of these different denominations start up? Why did all of these doctrines go off in different directions? Churches can't even agree with one another. They can't. The reason they can't agree with one another is because they're not following the original way. And the way that I'm speaking of is the believers in the way that were following Yeshua 2,000 years ago. So how did we go from synagogues to keeping the feasts and festivals, to keeping the Sabbath, to keeping the Torah? How did we go from that to a whole bunch of different denominations? I don't have to name them, like I said. You know all of the denominations, all of the church denominations. Then you have Catholicism. How did we go from that to that? And how did we develop all of these doctrines to where churches do not even agree with one another? Of course, and then you've got your Mormons and your Jehovah's Witnesses. You know, you've got that going on. What's sad is some of these denominations have some truth in them. They do. They have some truth in them. However, they also have a little stuff mixed in here and there that makes it a big lie. That makes it a huge lie. So how did we go from synagogues, keeping the Torah, feast and festivals, Sabbath, to all of this? Then you have to consider all of the paganism that has crept into the churches. Please go see my playlist on paganism that has crept into the church. I have a playlist up on that. And this video is going to be something that branches off into a whole bunch of other tiny videos that I'm going to do on different things that have come into the church that are not right, that are false. We need to get back to the way the followers and believers were 2,000 years ago. And it is so important because we have lost a lot of truth. And I know that all of you are going to be screaming at me while I'm making this video saying, but wait a minute, what about law and covenant and all this? We're going to get into all of that. Oh, yes, we are. We are going to get into all of that because that has to be explained too. So there are so many Christians and churches who have taken the Bible out of context. They have misinterpreted scripture. They have no discernment. It's really scary. It is really scary. That's what I've been called to do. I've been called to warn the people to get back onto this narrow path. The wide path, that's the churches that are running off in a whole bunch of different directions. And there are some Messianic Jews who are not right either. I'm going to say it right now. There are some of you Messianic Jews who are not right either. Okay? I'm just going to say that there is wrong on both sides of the fence. And we're going to talk about all of that coming up. So stay tuned to this channel. Please make sure you hit my subscribe button and turn on your notification bell so that you know when I post, so you don't miss these videos. These are very important. We really need to reassess where we're at, start asking questions, start looking at Yeshua and the disciples' examples, and not necessarily the men of today, because the men of today have led a lot of us astray. I'm talking about, the preachers, the preachers in the pulpits. I was trying to say all that at once, and I get like that sometimes. Please forgive me. Sometimes I get my speech all jumbled up sometimes when I'm trying to the thoughts come into my head so fast, and I try to talk so fast, and then sometimes it doesn't come out right. Sorry, I apologize for that. But yeah, so the preachers in the pulpits, okay, they are leading, they have led so many people astray over the years, and they just pass this stuff down from generation to generation, and people just do it because that's what they've always been taught. That's how they've always been taught, and they always follow by example, and they think their church is right, they think their pastor is right, and there's so much wrong in the church today. We need to get back to the truth. Not what we want, not what they want, okay? We need to go back to the original scripture and see what the first believers were doing. All right, so I will be back on. We're going to talk about law and covenant again. We're going to talk about other topics. We're going to talk about the Sabbath. We're going to talk about the feasts and festivals. We're going to talk about foods we should not be eating. We're going to be talking about a lot of stuff. The Trinity, the false Trinity doctrine. We're going to talk about how that is not correct. We are going to talk about a lot of these things that the churches are running with right now that are false. We're going to talk about paganism in the church, how that's crept in. And I'm going to keep these videos fairly short. I'd say between 10 and 15 minutes probably a video. And we're going to go over all of this stuff. And so think about how Yeshua and the disciples did it 2,000 years ago. That's how we should still be doing things now. They still kept the Torah after Yeshua died. They still kept the Sabbath after Yeshua died. They still kept the feasts and festivals after Yeshua died. Okay, they never stopped doing any of these things. Yes, they were meeting on the first day of the week, but they were still keeping Saturday as a Sabbath. Okay? So start thinking about, how did Yeshua and the disciples do things 2,000 years ago? Am I following their example? Or am I listening to my pastor and listening to my particular denomination? Am I deceived by false doctrines? Am I deceived by just man's opinions? And a lot of people do take the scripture out of context. They misinterpret, they twist it. Sad part is a lot of them twist it. Okay, and a lot of them do not have any discernment. So I will end this video now, and I will see you on the next video. Start thinking about how they did things 2,000 years ago. Are we still doing them the same way today? And if not, why? Talk to you all then.